This is part 2 of my particular series in which Muslims, some of the methodologies in which Muslims use to attack Christianity. Remember, when dealing with Muslims, there's going to be some things in which they attempt to do. When one confronted, they will attack the validity of the Bible because it comes into clear contradiction with the Quran. They'll state that the Bible contains numerous contradictions, and then also that they criticize it for its lack of manuscripts, but it poses a bigger problem for them. And also they claim the Bible is false because it contradicts the Quran. They feel that the Quran is 100% authoritative, and therefore the Bible must not be. And this particular one, this is, I guess, is going to be number 2 on Muslims' attempts to attack Christianity, is that they will position the Apostle Paul against Jesus Christ. They will position the Apostle Paul against Christ. They say that, well, anything written by Paul is not valid. It's quite interesting that the Quran never makes an assertion as such. The Quran never says that the Apostle Paul hijacked Christianity from Jesus Christ and his earlier followers. It never does that. Muslims often make this claim that Paul never met Jesus and was not a disciple or an apostle of Jesus. Of course, this is not true in a sense, but Paul encountered the risen Jesus on the road of Damascus in Acts chapter 9. People read the Bible, read the book of Acts. That he met him on the road to Damascus in Acts chapter 9 after Jesus' resurrection. Jesus spoke to him and commissioned him personally. So Paul did meet Jesus. Also, Peter, who was a disciple of Jesus, authenticated Paul's writings by calling Paul's writings scripture themselves. So Peter, a personal follower of Jesus Christ, was well aware of the Apostle Paul and says, his writings are scriptures too. Read 2 Peter 3:15 and 16. If they were inspired, then they cannot contradict Jesus' words. In addition, many Muslims claim that Jesus never claimed to be God and that Paul is the one who wrote that Jesus was God. First of all, if they admit that Paul wrote that Jesus was God, then remind them of 2 Peter 3:15, where Peter calls Paul's writings scripture themselves. Nevertheless, they sometimes assert that Paul hijacked Christianity and took it over and made Jesus into something he was not. This claim is flatly and just downright wrong. So perhaps the primary area where Muslims think that Paul and Jesus contradict themselves is the area of who Jesus is. Paul asserts that Jesus is God in flesh, Colossians 2:9, for in him the fullness of deity dwells in bodily form. Muslims assert that nowhere in the gospel did Jesus claim to be God. Therefore, they claim Paul's words are not true and that the Bible is not trustworthy. This attack by Muslims is an attack based off of opinion. Jesus did claim to be God. Read John chapter 8, 56 through 59. Where Jesus says that your father Abraham, talking to the Jewish Pharisees, or to some of the Jewish leaders, your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day. He saw it and was glad. The Jews therefore said to him, you are not yet 50 years old, and have you seen Abraham? Jesus said unto him, truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am. Therefore they picked up stones to throw it at him, but Jesus hid himself and went out into the temple. Why did the Pharisees want to kill Jesus? They explained their reason in John 10:33 when they said, for a good work we don't try to stone you, but for blasphemy, and because you, being a man, make yourself God. Whether or not Muslims will accept this, let alone agree that this is correct, matters little, because his presupposition will not allow him to accept no matter what the New Testament says. Nevertheless, the text clearly states that the Pharisees understood that Jesus was claiming to be God. In this verse, Jesus healed an individual on the Sabbath, and the Pharisees thought that he was breaking the Sabbath law. John the Apostle also states that when Jesus claimed that God was his Father, that it was making himself equal with God. Read it within the New Testament context. The Muslim will always find a way to argue out of these particular texts, but two facts remain. Jesus claimed to be God. The Pharisees denied that Jesus was God, and the Muslims agree with the Pharisees. There are other areas that Muslims will say that where Paul and Jesus do not agree, but when they bring it up, always ask for example. Each time I've done this, I've discovered that Muslims do not have a sufficient understanding of what the text is saying. Remember, context is key. Pretexting is sheer nonsense. So a biblical text out of context is sheer nonsense. So, and I'm going to upload part 3 of this major one right here about Muslims' attempts to attack Christianity.